Hi, everybody. It's Miss Peggy again for story time. And as you know, we're reading The Magician's Nephew. And we're ready to start chapter 6. So let me just read the last few words of chapter 5 to refresh your memories. Now, shouted Diggory, and quick, shouted Polly. They plunged their left hands into their pockets. They didn't even need to put the rings on. The moment they touched them, the whole of that dreary world vanished from before their eyes. They were rushing upward, and a warm green light was growing nearer and nearer overhead. Let go, let go, screamed Polly. This chapter, by the way, is called The Beginning of Uncle Andrew's Troubles. Let go, screamed Polly. I'm not touching you, said Diggory. Then their heads came out of the pool, and once more the sunny quietness of the wood between the world was all around them. And it seemed richer and warmer and more peaceful than ever after the staleness and ruin of the place they had just left. And I think that if they had been left to their own devices, they would have forgotten who they were and where they came from, and they would have just lain down and enjoyed themselves, half asleep, listening to the growing of the trees. But this time there was something that kept them wide awake. For as soon as they had gotten onto the grass, they found that they were not alone. The queen, or the witch, whichever you want to call her, had come up with them, holding on to Polly's hair. That was why Polly had been shouting, "Let go!" This proved, by the way, another thing about the rings which Uncle Andrew hadn't told Diggory because he didn't know it himself. In order to jump from world to world by using one of those rings, you don't need to be wearing or touching it yourself. It's enough if you're touching someone who's touching it. In that way, they work like a magnet. And everyone knows that if you pick up a pin with a magnet, any other pin that is touching the first pin will come too. Now that you saw her in the woods, Queen Jadis looked different. She was much paler than she had been, so pale that hardly any of her beauty was left. And she was stooped, and she seemed to be finding it hard to breathe, as if the air of that place stifled her. Neither of the children felt the least bit afraid of her now. Let go of my hair, said Polly. What do you mean by it? Here, let go of her hair at once, said Diggory. And they both turned and struggled with her, and they were stronger than she was. And in a few seconds, they had forced her to let go. She reeled back, panting, and there was a look of terror in her eyes. Quick, Diggory, said Polly, change rings and into the home pool. Help, help, mercy, cried the witch in a faint voice, staggering after them. Take me with you. You can't mean to leave me in this horrible place. You're killing me. It's a reason of state, said Polly spitefully, like when you killed all those people in your own world. Do be quick, Polly. Do be quick, Diggory. They had put on the green rings, but Diggory said, Oh, bother, what are we to do? He couldn't help but feeling a little sorry for the queen. Don't be such an ass, said Polly. 10 to 1, she's only pretending. Do come on. And then both children plunged into the home pool. It's a good thing we made that mark, thought Polly. But as they jumped, Diggory felt that a large, cold finger and thumb had caught him by the ear. Like that. And as they sank down and the confused shape of our own world began to appear, the grip of that finger and thumb grew stronger. The witch was apparently recovering her strength. Diggory struggled and kicked, but it wasn't of the least use. In a moment, they found themselves in Uncle Andrew's study, and there was Uncle Andrew himself, staring at the wonderful creature that Diggory had brought back from the other world. And well, he might stare. Diggory and Polly stared too. There was no doubt that the witch had gotten over her faintness, and now one saw in our own world, with ordinary things around her, she fairly took your breath away. In Charn, she'd been alarming enough. In London, she was terrifying. For one thing, they hadn't realized until now just how very big she was. Hardly human was what Diggory thought when he looked at her. And he must have been right, for they do say there is some giant blood in the royal family of Charn. But even her height was nothing compared with her beauty, her fierceness, and her wildness. She looked 10 times more alive than all the people in London. Uncle Andrew was bowing and rubbing his hands, and, to tell the truth, extremely frightened. He seemed a little shrimp of a creature beside the witch. And yet, as Polly said afterwards, there was a sort of likeness between her face and his, something in the expression. It was the look that all wicked magicians have, that mark that Jadis said that Diggory did not have. One good thing about seeing the two of them together was that you could never again be afraid of Uncle Andrew, any more than you'd be afraid of a worm after you'd met a rattlesnake, or of a cow after you'd met a mad bull. Pooh, thought Diggory to himself. Him a magician? Now she's the real thing. Uncle Andrew kept on rubbing his hands and bowing. He was trying to say something very polite, but his mouth had gone dry so that he couldn't speak. His experiment with the rings, as he called it, was turning out more successful than he liked. For though he had dabbled in magic for years, he had always left all the dangers, as far as one can, to other people. Nothing at all like this had ever happened to him before. Here's Uncle Andrew and Jadis. Then Jadis spoke, not very loud, but there was something in her voice that made the whole room quiver. Where is the magician that has called me into this world? Madam, gasped Uncle Andrew, I am most honored, most gratified, most unexpected pleasure. If only I had made an opportunity to make some preparations. Where is the magician, fool? I am, madam, and I hope you will excuse any liberty these naughty children might have taken with you. I assure you there was no intention. You, said the Queen, in a still more terrible voice. Then, with one stride, she crossed the room, seized a great handful of Uncle Andrew's hair, and pulled his head back so that his face looked up into hers. Then she studied his face, just as she had studied Diggory's face in the Palace of Charn. He blinked and licked his lips nervously all the time. At last she let him go, so suddenly that he reeled back against the wall. I see, she said scornfully. You are a magician of a sort. Stand up, you dog, and don't sprawl there as if you were speaking to your equals. How dare you come to know magic? You are not of royal blood, I swear. Well, no, not particularly in the strictest sense, stammered Uncle Andrew. We're not exactly royal, ma'am. The Ketterleys are, however, a very old family, a very old Dorsetshire family, ma'am. Peace, said the witch. I see what you are. You're a poor little peddling magician who works by rules and books. There's no real magic in your blood and your heart. Your kind was made an end of in my world 1,000 years ago. But here I shall allow you to be my servant. I should be most happy, delighted to be of service, a pleasure, I assure you. Peace, you talk far too much. Listen to your first task. I see we're in a large city. Procure for me at once a chariot or a flying carpet or a well-trained dragon or whatever is usual for royal and noble persons in your land. Then bring me to places where I can get clothes and jewels and slaves fit for my rank, and tomorrow I will begin the conquest of your world. I'll go and order a cab at once, gasped Uncle Andrew. Stop, said the witch, just as he reached the door. Do not dream of treachery. My eye can see through walls, and my eyes can see into the minds of men. They will be on you wherever you go. At the first sign of disobedience, I will lay such spells on you that anything you sit on will feel like red-hot iron, and whenever you lie down in bed there will be an invisible block of ice at your feet. Now go!" The old man went out, looking like a dog with his tail between his legs. The children were now afraid that Jadis would have something to say to them about what had happened in the wood. As it turned out, however, she never mentioned it, either then or afterward. And I think, and Diggory thinks too, that her mind was of a sort that can't remember that quiet place at all. And however often you took her there, and however long you left her there, she would still know nothing about it. Now that she was left alone with the children, she took no notice of either of them. And that was like her too. In Charn, she had taken no notice of Polly, till the very end, because Diggory was the one she wanted to make use of. Now that she had Uncle Andrew, she took no notice of Diggory. I expect most witches are like that. They're not interested in things or people unless they can use them. They're terribly practical. So there was silence in the room for a minute or two, but you could tell by the way Jadis tapped her foot on the floor that she was growing impatient. Presently she said, as if to herself, "What is that old fool doing? I should have brought a whip." She stalked out of the room in pursuit of Uncle Andrew without one glance at the children. "Whew," said Polly, letting out a long breath of relief. "And now I must get home. It's frightfully late. I'm gonna catch it." "Well, do come back as soon as you can," said Diggory. "This is simply ghastly, having her here. We must make some sort of plan." "I think that's up to your uncle now," said Polly. "It was he who started all this messing about with magic." "All the same, you will come back, won't you? Hang it all, you can't leave me alone in a scrape like this." "I shall go home by the tunnel," said Polly, rather coldly. "That'll be the quickest way, and if you want me to come back, hadn't you better say you're sorry?" "Sorry?" said Diggory. "Well, now, isn't that just like a girl? What have I done?" "Oh, nothing, of course," said Polly sarcastically. "Only nearly screwed my wrist off in that room with all the waxworks, like a cowardly bully. Only struck the bell with the hammer, like a silly idiot. Only turned back in the wood so she had a chance to catch hold of you before we jumped into our own pool. That's all." "Oh," said Diggory, very surprised. "Well, all right, I'll say I'm sorry, and I really am sorry about what happened in that waxworks room. There, I've said I'm sorry, and now do be decent and come back. I shall be in a frightful mess if you don't." "I don't see what's going to happen to you. It's Mr. Ketterly who's going to sit on red-hot chairs and have ice in his bed, isn't it?" "It isn't that sort of thing," said Diggory. "What I'm bothered about is Mother. Suppose that creature goes into her room. She would frighten her to death." "Oh, I see," said Polly in a rather different voice. "All right, we'll call it peace. I'll come back if I can, but I must go now." And she crawled through the little door into the tunnel, that dark place among the rafters which had seemed so exciting and adventurous a few hours ago, but now seemed quite tame and homely now. We must go back to Uncle Andrew. His poor old heart went pit-a-pat as he staggered down the attic stairs, and he kept on dabbing at his forehead with a handkerchief. When he reached his bedroom, which was on the floor below, he locked himself in. And the first thing he did was to grope in his wardrobe for a bottle and a wine glass, which he always kept hidden there where Aunt Letty couldn't find them. He poured himself out a glassful of some nasty grown-up drink called brandy and drank it off at one gulp. Then he drew a deep breath. "Upon my word," he said to himself, "I'm dreadfully shaken, most upsetting, and in my time of life." He poured out a second glass and drank it too. And then he began to change his clothes. You have never seen such clothes, but I remember them. He put on a very high, shiny, stiff collar of the kind that made your head hold up your chin all the time. Sounds like an Eton collar, doesn't it? The kind that made you hold your chin up all the time. He then put on a white waistcoat with patterns on it and arranged his gold watch chain across the front. He put on his best frock coat, the one he kept for weddings and funerals, and he got out his best tall hat and polished it up. There was a vase of flowers, put there by Aunt Letty, on his dressing table, and he took one out and put it in his buttonhole. He took a clean handkerchief out of a little left-hand drawer and put a few drops of perfume on it. Then he took out his eyeglass with the thick black ribbon and put it into his eye and looked at himself in the mirror. Children have one kind of silliness, as you know, but grown-ups have another kind. At this moment, Uncle Andrew was beginning to be silly in a very grown-up way. Now that the witch was no longer in the same room with him, he was quickly forgetting how she had frightened him, and he was thinking more and more about her wonderful beauty. He kept on saying to himself, "A jolly fine woman, sir, a jolly fine woman, a superb creature." He had also somehow managed to forget that it was the children who had gotten hold of this superb creature. He felt that he himself, by his magic, had called her out of unknown worlds. "Andrew, my boy," he said to himself as he looked in the mirror, "are a devilish well-preserved old fellow for your age, a distinguished-looking man, sir." You see, the foolish old man was actually beginning to imagine that the witch would fall in love with him. The 2 drinks probably had something to do with it, and so had putting on his best clothes. But he was in any case as vain as a peacock. That was why he had become a magician. He unlocked the door, went downstairs, sent the housemaid out to find a hansom cab. A hansom cab is a carriage pulled by a horse, because, of course, we're talking about days before cars were invented. Everyone had lots of servants in those days, and he looked into the drawing room, and there, as he expected, he found Aunt Letty. She was busy mending a mattress. It lay on the floor near the window, and she was kneeling on it. "Ah, Letitia, my dear," said Uncle Andrew, I have to go out. Just lend me £5 or so. There's a good gal." Gel was the way he pronounced girl. "No, Andrew, dear," said Aunt Letty, in her firm, quiet voice, without looking up from her work. "I've told you time without number that I will not lend you money." "And now, pray, don't be troublesome, my dear gal," said Uncle Andrew. "It's most important. You will put me in a deucedly awkward position if you don't." "Andrew," said Aunt Letty, looking him straight in the face, "I wonder that you are not ashamed to ask me for money." There was a long, dull story of a grown-up kind behind these words. All you need to know is Uncle Andrew, while managing dear Letty's business matters for her and never doing any work and running up large bills for brandy and cigars, which Aunt Letty had paid for time and again, had made her a good deal poorer than she had been 30 years ago. "My dear gal," said Uncle Andrew, "you don't understand. I have some quite unexpected expenses today. I have to do a little entertaining. Come now, don't be tiresome." "And who, pray, are you going to entertain, Andrew?" said Aunt Letty. A most distinguished visitor has arrived." "Distinguished fiddlesticks," said Aunt Letty. "There hasn't been a ring at the bell for the last hour." At that moment, the door was suddenly flung open. Aunt Letty turned around and saw with amazement that an enormous woman, splendidly dressed, with bare arms and flashing eyes, stood in the doorway. It was the witch. I bet you knew that, didn't you? See you next time. Bye.